over and over. So what's the thing we're going to do? We teach our children to dream big, because that's where the internalization happens. We teach them to set goals, because as they're setting goals, they get to practice. They get to try out different things. You know, they set this one, they meet it or they don't, they reset it, they shift the goalpost, etc. It's okay to do that, because that's the rehearsal part. Once they start taking action, you want them to repeat the thing that is a good thing that they're doing. All right? So that's the process of behavior. So if we understand our children's behavior across those stages that we talked about, and we try as much as possible to support them, connection will naturally happen. It will be easy to actually see how they're connecting. All right? So here is what you do as a parent. You decide these are the values we're going to uphold as a family. And it doesn't matter what your family structure is, but as long as you have this relationship, you decide on the values that you're actually going to have in your family. It will mean you talk about it. You will need to spend time with them, right? Sharing these values. Most importantly, you're going to need to live the values, because remember, they learn by observing. So you actually want them to observe you living those particular values. And these values will be things like respect. I mean, there's a whole lot of them. Respect. If respect is one of the things you value, then show them that you respect people. If you value honesty, show them you value honesty. Be honest. Let them catch you being honest, right? The other thing you do is instruct clearly. So be clear with what you're saying. Many times we instruct the way we were brought up. And this is our dear African country. We were brought up with sarcasm. Our parents would say things and they're very, very sarcastic, but somehow we would catch the message. Why were we catching this message? Because everyone around us was having the same conversation. Because we had this village that would help us understand these are the conversations that are going on. But today's children, back against the challenges we're having with raising them, today's children need clear instructions. We may come up with all sorts of theories and say that we have dumbed down things, they're not able to think at a certain level, whatever it might be. If your instruction is not clear, then don't be surprised when your connection does not exist, because then they don't know what to do. The next thing you do is teach decision making as a parent. And as you're teaching the decision making, you're giving an instruction, you show them how to make a decision around that instruction, and then you let them do it. So they need to be the one who are experiencing that thing. So on the one hand, I've said the heavier side is going to be things about decision making, understanding consequences, etc. Those are the things that the children will experience from you. But the thing you do as a parent is share your values, give instruction. As you're doing all this, as you're giving instruction, the teaching, the decision making, agreeing on consequences is part of the process. Agree on what's going to happen if they do the thing that you have asked them to do, or if they don't do the thing that you have asked them not to do. So as you give instructions, agree on consequences. But here is what happens when we are doing this consequence thing. We forget to enforce them, which is so related to the last point of being consistent. We forget to do it, or we feel too lazy or not bothered. You know, there's always going to be reasons why we are not enforcing the consequences. But here's what happens when we don't enforce consequences. We basically make it hard for our children to have stability, because they don't know, if I obey today, what will happen? If I disobey, what will happen? If something happens and I don't do what I was instructed to do, will my parent even understand? So we start creating anxious spaces when we don't enforce consequences. The other thing we do when we don't enforce consequences, we end up doing emotional discipline. And whenever you discipline emotionally, you end up confusing the child, confusing the teenager, confusing the person that you're disciplining. And of course, the more confused we are, we won't connect. Because remember, there's a relational principle. You can't influence someone you don't know. And whenever you're inconsistent, you put yourself in a place of not being known, by your child. So here's how discipline basically works. This is an illustration. You heard that I've written a book called Eggs, Hammers, and Chili Peppers. The table, so both of them are from the book. The table on the left, I adopted from, what's his name? A parenting guru. I've just forgotten the name. It's just gone off my head. But it looks at the difference between punishment and discipline when it comes to parenting. Discipline helps us connect. Punishment causes a disconnect. The purpose of punishment is really to inflict a penalty. So when a child has done something wrong, because on this journey, you have shared your values, you have instructed on how behavior should be, they're still playing around with it and wondering what's going to happen. They are going to offend you. They are going to do something wrong at some point. If you punish them, what you're doing is inflicting a penalty. But when you take the stance of discipline, you're training them for correction and maturity. That means there needs to be a conversation around that painful consequence of their behavior or the painful consequence of the choice that they have made. The other thing is the focus. The difference between punishment and discipline is the focus. When you're punishing a child, you actually focus on all the things that they have done wrong, and this is just another one of them. And so you're beating them because they did this yesterday, they have been doing this since you told them, you know, whatever. So you're focusing on the things that they have already done wrong. And the thing with kids or teens or whoever, they look at it and they think, wasn't that punishment enough? I mean, you already told me that last week. I'm sorry I've done this now, but wasn't that enough? They don't want to focus on the past. So even for us, what we need to do is focus on future correct acts. So when you're enforcing the consequence, what are you telling this person that you're disciplining? And by this person, I mean the child, the teen, because we're talking in the parenting space. You're telling them, this is who I'd like you to be when you grow up. This is what I'm looking forward to you being when you're older, which is why I'm correcting this, which is why we are having this particular result of a punishment, okay? So focus on future correct acts. Then here is the attitude. And we're going to look at the attitude of both the parent and the child in question. The parent becomes hostile and shows their frustration. So you're beating back again, past deeds. I want to punish you for this. You must feel pain. The hostility and the frustration starts coming out when it comes to the parent. And of course, nobody wants to connect to somebody like that. Then what happens to the child? They become a don't care. I don't know how many of us have had the thing of you're disciplining a child. First few times you discipline them, they seem to be afraid. They seem to be, you know, sorry, remorseful. Then a point reaches and they don't care. You know, just do your worst. Hit me, do whatever. You'll be done anyway. These children also go on to school and in their tribes. Remember, they still have the tribe that they're looking for at some point. They go and they tell them, I'm going to do this, but this is what my parent is going to do. They already know you. They know us more than we know them. So they go and they say, they know they're going to be punished. They know they're going to be beaten. They know you will not listen. They don't care, right? It's better they deal with it later, but at least they have had their fun. So when we punish, we actually increase the disconnect. We actually isolate and push aside our children. And so connecting with them is harder much later in life. And I don't know whether as I'm going through this, you're also thinking about the relationship you may have had with your own parent. When you find there's a disconnect, some of these things are the ones that contributed to it. Then there's a part of disciplining. When you're disciplining, the attitude from the parent is love and concern. Now, that's why it's also important to agree on consequences, because when you have agreed on consequences, then you really do not need to get angry when they have done something that they've done wrong, because it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with the thing that they have actually done. So when it's about love and concern, you will still enforce the consequence and you don't have to be angry about it. They have done the wrong thing. You had told them the second time they do this, this is what's going to happen, enforce it. Now, what happens in the best case scenario, there's going to be remorse on the child's part. Because they're going to look at it and they're thinking, it's not just about mom or dad. I really have done something wrong and I'm sorry, right? So at some point, they will get to understand that this is what's going on. And so what's the resulting emotion? Remember, we had said at the beginning, the 0 to 4 is motivated by safety. At all stages, when you discipline your child, they feel secure in who you are. They understand this is actually who you are and you love them enough to actually make sure they're staying in what we call the straight and narrow. But as long as you're beating them with this attitude, the punishing attitude, and they're getting to the point of they don't care, they will be afraid of you. They will be afraid in having any relationship with you. And at some point, they actually end up feeling guilty. And again, I don't know whether some of you have had this question, but it's a question that's coming up a lot today, more than before. I'm hearing it a whole lot more today than I had it before, where kids are asking, if you didn't want to have children, why did you give birth to us? That's one question. Another one they're asking is, am I adopted? Because is it my fault that all of this is going on? And we're going to look at corporate, workplace wellness, and see how that is being emphasized by the places we are at in the workplace. We punish our children when we are frustrated and they end up feeling guilty, or they think that they're supposed to have guilt around it. And again, that kills the connection. You will not be able to connect across a lifetime if that is the process you're doing. But how do you then do it? The diagram on the right is showing a village, a sample of the people to include in the village of your child. Now, the person in the center in this particular illustration is a teenager. So I just put, I can work with 14, right? Because a 14-year-old now will help me do all this math that you're seeing here of the 24, 34, etc. A 14-year-old needs somebody who's at least 10 years older than them. They have the cool factor, they connect with them, and that person gets them while still being a role model. Then they have the person that I call the bridge. So before I go to the bridge, let me talk about the parent. A 14-year-old has a parent who's somewhere between 39 to 54 years, depending on when they got the child. Now, the parent will always be the parent. Can be good, can be bad, can be boring, can be old-fashioned, can be all those names that they will call them. But a child will always take the parent relationship to be, that's my mom and dad, this is who I am, let's stick to our lanes. But there's somebody I call the bridge who is between the 24-year-old and the parent. Why them? They're old enough to be these adults that the parent can trust, to be the kind of person that the kid is saying, when I grow up, and they're looking further. Remember talking about setting goals. When they're setting goals to see when they're going to make their first million and all that, they look at it around the 34 years. And again, these numbers are just for illustration of a space. This bridge is also cool to the 24, aspirational to the 24, and trustworthy to the 39 to 54 parents. So they're the person who will be in the place where they understand both sides, and therefore the kid can look up to them also. Have that person in your village as much as possible. Then the other person is an old person who I've put there as the grandparent, as an example. Not all grandparents, but they are the grandparents level. The good thing about these people is that they're older and they're wiser. They also spoil our children in some cases. But this the aging and the wisdom that they have, they could tell the same message to your teenager or to your child, and your child will listen and believe them. Because they don't have this, the pain of punishment, the pain of discipline that is obstructing the relationship. So the old person is actually important for this reason, the wisdom and all that. But then there's the one who's 10 years younger. The role of the 4 to 9-year-old, this younger child, to the teenager is to give them a sense of significance. Your teenager needs to feel loved, feel cool to somebody else. And nobody is going to look down and see, oh, this is so cool. So 24-year-old will not be looking aspirationally at the 14, but the 4 to 9-year-old will be looking up at the 14-year-old and saying, gosh, this is so cool. When I grow up, this is where I want to be. And now, regardless of where your children are in this angle, put them in the village. They don't have to be the center. If the 4-year-old is the center, work it out in something that works for you. And so you have them living amongst people who are going to enhance the values that you're teaching them, who are going to enhance and emphasize the instructions that you're giving them. These are the people who are going to be there for them when they're doing the different things, the different extracurricular activities. If you look at the ages of coaches and club leaders, when you go to places like you're taking your children for all these extracurricular activities, you'll find the age ranges between 24 and 34. And that's why we need these people in the village. Now, when you're intentional as a parent, your child gets to trust you and your choices, and therefore they feel connected to you more. This is something that I have used with my own children, and I have seen it work, right? And so allowed people into the village, connected with them, my children connect with them, and therefore my children also feel connected to me in this process. But now comes the argument of where are we going to get time for all this? How do you link now family life and corporate wellness? Family life and what's going on at work. These are some dimensions of the things that corporate wellness takes care of, workplace wellness. We have been told these are some of the things that they need to take care of. But at the same time, they're the same things getting affected by the family life. So what do we do? If you look at the emotional dimension, you're expected to be safe, okay, and fine in the workplace. But you might find the family setting is actually draining you as far as your emotions are concerned. So again, I don't know who's in the room, but when it comes to somebody, like if you're a HR person and an employee comes in moody, rather than talk about the attitude they need to be having at work and take them for a team building, could you just ask what's going on at home? We have found over time that whatever is going on at home that's draining or feeding the emotions of your employee will affect what's going on at work. And now this is for the people at home. You could be a spouse, you could be somebody's partner or whatever it is, and this person comes home in a mood. Try and understand what's going on at work, because we carry the emotions from work home and vice versa. Anybody who ends up not carrying it home has somewhere that they're taking them, and therefore they're denying home a connection. If I'm going to be frustrated at work, I take the problem home, I'm hurting my children or hurting my family. If I'm going to be frustrated at work and I don't want to take it home, therefore I take it somewhere like to the bar, to the club, or to the gym or somewhere else, then I'm diverting it. Yes, I'm able to handle it, but at what point do I then connect and tell the people at home, this is what's going on? So there's the emotional dimension of our life at work and our life at home, which gets affected. There is a social dimension. Social has to do with the people we are hanging out with, the people that we enjoy our free time with as much as possible. We need to understand that who we hang out at work, who we hang out with at work, will influence or affect who we hang out with at home. And the better connected people are the ones who are able to find a place where there's an overlap. Not everybody at work needs to be brought into the home setting and vice versa. But if you can get an overlap on the social space, then you end up living a more fulfilled life. You end up living a more connected life. And your children at least have an idea of what you do at work, and they'll cut you some slack as they understand the things that are going on. Then there's environmental. This is coming up a lot because besides the obvious physical things that we are seeing, we also need to get to the place where we are connecting with the environment. And dare I say that one of the things that has affected parenting in this case is how we have changed our environment. We have made it so built up that when we are saying that children's physical needs need to be embraced, their interests need to be engaged, we are quickly denying them the environment that allows that to happen. Our children are not seeing sun. Our children are not seeing spaces, getting spaces to run around because we are living in concrete jungles more and more and more. Are we able to see what the connection is? And even for ourselves as employees or as workers, CEOs, whatever your position may be, how much time are you actually spending at work? And how much of it can you actually spend out there enjoying nature? So let's look at the environment, let's take care of it, let's engage with it as much as possible. Then we have the intellectual, what we are doing with our minds. Back again to me mentioning that we have reached a point where we are dumbing down education. How are we engaging our children? How are we engaging ourselves? Do we read together? Do we play games that challenge our mind? Because when we engage intellectually, we also connect. So all these dimensions will also help us connect with our children. And what else happens is as the children are growing, if you are connecting with them at an intellectual level, they will trust your advice. They will trust your wisdom. You will be the person that they come to when they need to think about a career to take, when they need to think about a place to move to, because I'm hoping they'll be moving out of your homes. When they're trying to grapple with decisions, they will engage with you at an intellectual level. But again, if you're in a workplace where you don't engage intellectually, that frustration will be taken out on the family. If you feel wasted intellectually at the corporate level, at the family level, you'll, depending on your personality, you would end up coming down at them, lording it over your children, or just expecting the same problem. And the other thing, the intellectual level causes a lot of strife in marital spaces. Because if one person is advancing academically, and I don't just mean studying in school, if one person is advancing intellectually and the other one remains at the same place, the marital gap increases. Therefore, marital conflict increases and disconnection increases. So we have to be looking at what we are doing on the intellectual level. In the office, we need to be encouraging our employees to grow intellectually, because it is in that intellectual growth that they're actually going to encourage the same in their family. So these things are really just tied together. All of them connect. Then, of course, there's physical. Yes, we are embracing our children's physical needs, but how about our own? Do we play as colleagues? Do we take time, and not just the gym? Every time I've been approached to do corporate wellness programs, or when I've tried to pitch for corporate wellness programs, one of the things that I keep hearing is they have free membership in a gym. But are people taking it? Are we having conversations about our health and nutrition? And now in this day and age of screens and everything else, are we taking care of our physical needs as a person, individual, whether at work or at home? And are we encouraging the same within the family? Another thing about the physical, it is the one of the things that is causing a lot of downtime in the workplace. It's one of the things that's causing a lot of stress in the family space. Because now when we sit, we're doing nothing, you get illnesses, you're unwell, family has to suffer looking after you, workplace, you get kicked out because, oh, perhaps you're not delivering as you ought to have delivered. So we need to be working on our physical space and doing that with our children. So now how do we bring this together? So let's say as an office, you have told your employees, and again, not sure who I'm talking to, but you're in a space where for the employee, they need to engage in something physical. How about going for a ride with your kids? How about going to play some game with your kids, going and captaining their football team or whatever it may be, going swimming with them? You will engage physically, your body, you will connect with your family, and you will connect deeper with your child. And how does this end up lasting a lifetime? You're also setting an example for who they should be with their own children. And soon you can be a whole 3 generations of people going on a holiday somewhere and really having a lot of fun together. So the physical is also important. Spiritual. We have heard that a family that prays together stays together. We need to spend time connecting at the spiritual level as much as possible. Because then what that does is connect us not just to each other, but also to God, to somebody higher than we actually are. So the spiritual connection requires us to pray together, to worship together, to do these things together, and pass on that power to somebody higher than us. Because a time will come as a parent when you're unable to deliver or answer all your children's questions. What happens is when you say, I am praying to God, you show your children how to direct their needs to God. And I know that when we are connected to God, it becomes much easier to also connect to man, to our fellow humans. So these connections that we want to last a lifetime will include a spiritual connection. Why have I put financial? Because financial wellness, we spend so much time at work, sometimes for the money, and then that money ends up going down the drain because of one thing or another. When we are taking care of our financial wellness, our family thrives. When we are growing financially, learning, getting equipped, applying the things that we are learning, we end up doing the best for our family. Financial wellness will mean that you're not going to leave. Back again, this is about connections that will last a lifetime, meaning that at some point life will end. When your life ends, what's the financial state you're going to leave your children in? And not just financial in terms of hard cash, financial in terms of mental. So as you're learning, as you're improving your financial welfare, and companies tend to do this when it comes to corporate wellness programs, do the same for your family. So they're not bearing the tough end of things when you go. The last thing I want to talk about when it comes to family and corporate wellness and the link between the two is purpose. We need to be going towards something. We need to be working towards something and passing it on to somebody. When we live a life of purpose, we give value to the connections that we build along the way. And when our children see that we have a purpose, we are heading somewhere, we have a direction that we need to be going to, then they can connect with us by asking about their own, by asking for help in their own. So none of these things are going to happen independently, much as they could be independent on their own when it comes to understanding them. They are all connected in building this overall connection. So that's a link that I would put between family life and corporate wellness. Don't just excel at work. Make sure that the same way you're excelling at work, you're excelling at home. Don't just have a nice home. Those things that are working at home, the connections that are working at home, pass them on to your corporate space as much as possible, right? And yes, we had said we're going to actually look at the questions. So we shall look at those. So what I want to do, just so that I can stop the share, is just show you different resources that we have, right? You were told my organization is called Ritro Group, and we run both private and corporate sessions, group sessions with different people. And those are the programs that we have. We have Connect and Relate, which does something like this, the parenting, where we basically guide parents or anybody in that space, young adults, etc., in matters life. That's where we teach life skills and things like that. Then we have something we call Shades of Pink. This particular one is for girls and women a lot of the time. And again, just by virtue of the fact that there's a lot of that going on, those who do boys programs have the boys programs. For Ritro, we don't have specific boys programs at the moment running. And then we have something we call Winning at Work and Home, which is the last one, and looks at different ways to balance all of this. And those are the books. The images on the right are the books, and the Winning Woman is actually a journal, things that we have produced, resources that we have that help people on this journey, right? So asanteni sana. I'd like to stop sharing so that then we can have conversations around the questions that may have arisen. Over to you, Wendy. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Shalom. That was really enlightening. For me, the biggest thing was the types of relationships or the networks that we should help, or people we should have. The village, actually, for me, I look at it as a modern definition of a village. We always say that it takes a village to raise a child. And for me, I've now seen a picture of what that modern village looks like. that I need to have older children, I need to have younger children, and then I need to have, you know, the grandparents and all of those who help reinforce, hopefully not to counter what it is that
Yes.
I instill in my children. So thank you for that. And in fact, one of the questions that I have seen in the chat is from Sebastian. And Sebastian is asking, what do you do about that grandparent who is a spoiler, eh? The ones who spoil the grandchildren. You take your grandchildren there and, you know, it's like, apana, wacha mtoto wakue. Let them just have fun. Let them just, you know, how do you handle that kind of relationship?
You saw the last slide that had something about purpose, direction, and things that you're doing. When you're clear on that and you have communicated it, share that with the grandma, grandpa. Tell them this is why I'm insisting on no gadgets for my children, or whatever it might be, because those are the ones now who are buying the gadgets that you are trying to refuse your children to have. Let them know that this is why I'm refusing them to do this or the other. Communicate that clearly. But guess what else there is? And I say this with caution, but again, without any doubt that this works. Even grandmas and grandpas need consequences. If you are doing right by your child, and this grandma, grandpa is not partnering with you on the journey, the consequence should be reduced time with your children. And I don't mean this in a mean way. I mean this in, we have a very short time frame for our children. So if we reduce the incidences in which our children will get spoiled, then we may have some more control. And if you're telling your parents, this grandma, grandpa, that this is what I'd like for my children, and they're not partnering with you in the process, then reduce the connection. One of the things that worked for me, I would say, don't bring my children gadgets. I don't want them to have gadgets until a later stage. Of course, there's going to be that person who feels that, you know, I don't know what I'm talking about. And they will just do what they do. And they bring the gadget. I didn't feel shame giving them back the gadget or telling them, if you don't take it back, I will sell it and use the money for books or something else that I'd like my child to have. Now, here is the risk of that. If your self-image, if your self-esteem, your self-image is wanting, and you're the place where you want to please people, and it really matters what people think about you, you won't be able to enforce this. So you'll need to sit back and just say, okay, let them spoil them. Now that's the extreme end of the spoiling. However, there are some times when it's okay for the grandma to spoil the child. Let them take them on a treat, as long as it is not chips every day, sweets every day, gadgets all the time. You know, there's a limit. If you have set the boundaries, a little spoiling is still okay. There's a saying that I read somewhere, said in jest, that grandchildren are God's gift to grandparents for not killing their own children. So understand that by the time your grandparents are getting children, they are relieved that they did so well with you that you can actually procreate. So it is something that they're enjoying. And by that time, life is no longer as serious as they thought it was going to be. They're not under pressure to do the right thing. And I think the other thing that they know is, even when they feed them all that sugar, you're the one who's going to sleep with them. So, I mean, sleep, you know, like go home with them. So you're the one who deals with the sugar rush. So they're relaxed in the process. So occasionally allow them to spoil your children. But if it is going against your values, please, please, please. If it's going to go against your values, please set boundaries. Please make sure that you're saying, this is where I'm going, and therefore I will not allow you to spoil your child up to this level. Yeah. Spare the rod, spoil the child. How do we manage the biblical teaching? Spare the rod is not about punishment. It's about discipline. So back again to what I talked about, the discipline. If you spare the rod, spoil the child, it means you're avoiding punishment. But if you actually discipline your child, The same Bible talks about a father who disciplines their child loves them. You know, it is out of love that we discipline. And that's where you're still going to do the chapter. You're still going to do whatever it is that you're going to do, but you're doing it for correction and maturity. Right? So let's stick to the biblical teaching. The biblical teaching did not say penalize, punish, get angry, beat up. That's not what it said. It said discipline. So let's follow. I still say let's follow the biblical teaching. Let's discipline. Let's train for correction. Let's focus on future correct acts, as opposed to saying that, okay, fine, we're not going to beat these children. And then it doesn't have to be beating. There's different ways of disciplining the person. Because I think another thing I should mention as far as discipline is concerned, when you discipline, you teach self-discipline. Self-discipline will not exist unless the discipline itself is happening. So teach the discipline, use the discipline. If it's going to mean using the rod, use the rod at 4. Because by 14, you don't need to be using the rod. Build relationship. Because as you build relationship, your children join you on the journey to their success, on the journey to whatever they need to be when they grow up. And you will connect for a lifetime with them, right? Then Nicodemus is asking, how should I handle work pressure? There's boundaries that are needed at work, even with this work pressure. I do not know the job that you're doing, but some jobs are high pressure, emergency type setting. So what I say about work pressure, and again, these are Shalom's opinions. Work pressure can kill you and have you lose everything. If you are not building margin at work, then ensure that you have decided how long you're going to stay at that job, right? So that you're not in a place that is so high pressure that you lose everything, you lose your life and you lose all that. There might be times when it's important to be in a high pressure situation, but if you let it last your children's lifetime, you will lose the children. So how do you handle work pressure? Build margin, take care of yourself. That's where the physical part was coming, the physical, the nutrition, exercise, walking around. Involve your children, connect with them where you need to connect with them. Let them see how you're doing at work and everything. Communicate to your bosses. If it's about the bosses putting the pressure, have boundaries. Sometimes the pressure we have at work is because we are allowing our colleagues to give us all the burdens. So distribute. So there's different work pressure that may end up coming. But for some, I would take like somebody in a medical space. Even in the medical space, you're not going to be busy all the time. If you're busy all the time, one of the things that I would end up saying is that you are thinking that you can play God. There's a doctor called Gabomate, who I follow a lot. He turned 80 the other day. And he said one of the things he would do differently if he were to do it all over again would be to work less. A lot of the time when we are talking about work pressure, it's because we are coming from a place of believing that that's the only alternative we have. But imagine if you're building a village, you're building margin, you're working on your wellness across all those dimensions that I have mentioned, you're taking care of your finances so that your finances start taking care of you. You will get to a place where work pressure is not a thing. You're delegating to people, you're saying no, which is the boundaries. You'll get to a place where you're able to handle the work pressure. But of course, the specific of how to handle it would be dependent on the job you're doing. Yeah. How would you encourage? I like this question. How would you encourage a parent who has brought a child grounded in the word with correct values and principles, only for the child to become a rebel in teenagehood? Two things I will refer you to. One is in Genesis, because you're talking about the word. The other one is Isaiah, chapter 5. In both places, everything right is done, but the way humans were created, they were created to have their own will. They will still do something wrong. They will still rebel. But in Genesis, so what happened is God created man and woman, and they went and did what they wanted to do. He couldn't stop them from doing it, but they went and did what they wanted to do. Why? He created man with a will, and therefore off they went. We are not bigger or better than God. Our children were created with their own will. So at some point, they will do what they want. Now, in Isaiah, what happens is things go so wrong that God decides he's going to destroy the whole Israel, the community, right? We don't want our children to get to a point where they're being destroyed by life experiences or, by life as a whole. So it's to understand when you're saying only for them to become a rebel in teenagehood, double down to what exactly they're rebelling against and what they're doing in that rebellion. When I look at myself as a teenager, I was brought up in church, knew the word, all those things. Come teenagehood, I really wanted to adventure, to just do something wild for the sake of it. And yes, I did do the wild things. But two things may have happened. There's a place where my parents were so strict that they didn't completely guide me in how to be wild within a safe space. So what would I say for the parent? Show your children how to be wild in a safe space, because they're still going to do these adventures. They want freedom. Remember, we said that 14 to 18, what they're motivated by is freedom. So maybe it's not rebellion as much as fighting for their freedom. So if you give them some freedom, of course, having done the values, agreed on consequences and ready to enforce them and stayed consistent, then rebellion may not be a long-term thing. They may just do one crazy thing and then they come back to what you need to do. And then think about what you consider rebellion. Because some things may not necessarily be rebellion, they may just be a form of expression that disagrees or doesn't go according to what your form of expression is. And I don't know what the case would be in this particular one, but there was a time when piercing our ears was rebellion. Tattooing was rebellion, and things like that. So be cognizant of what it is you consider rebellion, and then how permanent, if I may put that in quotes, the damage is, so that you're guiding your children. So for instance, you may consider drinking is rebellion. Is drinking rebellion, or is it the time at which it happens that is actually rebellion? So let's teach our children to handle, and I'm glad that this is NACADA that's doing this. How do we teach our children to handle their drugs and alcohol properly? How to say no. If you're not teaching boundaries, then they will look like they're being told to do things by other people and they rebel. So the rebellion thing will be solved by relationship. Yeah, it will be solved by building a relationship with this teenager and understanding that not all rebellion will be permanent. Yeah. Is it possible for me to discuss my financial status with my boss? I don't know whether it is financial status. Okay, so the first answer is yes, it should be possible for you to discuss your financial status with your boss. Why? Because your boss is the one who's paying you. And if we are looking at financial status in the context of that corporate wellness I was talking about, your boss should then be able to tell you, here are opportunities or places where you could actually save some money or invest your money so that you can get better. You can do your financials in a much better way. Financial status could include asking for a raise. Then you might find the economy is not allowing your boss to actually increase your pay. So how do you then get things done? That's when you look at things like, is it transportation that's costing you money, and would you be able to save a little money there? So depending on your boss, it is important to actually be able to discuss the financial status, your financial status with your boss. Now, if you don't want to discuss your financial status with your boss, find another person, but still have that financial status conversation. Find financial advisors. Right now, I love the age we are in, technology. Just go onto YouTube and you'll see the number of people who are willing to give free advice on our finances. Watch a little bit of that and see what you can do so that you're also taking charge. Because sometimes when we go to our bosses discussing our financial status, it's like we're making it their problem. My first boss, when I was about 19, 20 years old, did not care how much money he was paying us. We were being paid peanuts. But anybody who asked for a raise needed to justify why they are getting the raise. And the only people who got a raise were those who talked about the value they are bringing to the organization. not those who talked about life being difficult. So financial status is about maybe talking about how quote unquote hard your life may be. But if you come and say, these are the things I want to learn about, how do I get into this investment space? How do I make my money work for me? Then a good boss would be happy to have that conversation with you. Yeah. Let me see. There are some questions. Okay. Wendy, you could help me with those because I'm seeing the ones in the chat.
Oh, okay. So Frank Lawrence in the Q&A says he may have missed it. How about preparations for retirement? I'm not sure if he, caught the last part you were talking about in terms of, financial connection with the children, because I remember you were saying, we're all going to die. So when you die, what preparations, what will you have done, or left for your children? I'm not sure if that is the context. Frank, if you'd like to clarify your question. Otherwise, if you have a comment on that, you can go ahead and make it.
Yeah. Yes, so preparations for retirement, I would say, okay, so today we're talking about connecting as a parent. But yes, Wendy is right about that little bit about when you die, you have talked about conversations about your finances with your children. And then preparing, if I can take preparing for retirement on the level of connecting with our children, is they need to know that you're getting to a point where you will not be able to finance their needs. Now, the later we are getting children, the more we are getting to retirement before they're out of our homes and of our care. So you yourself need to be financially prepared for whatever it is that your children will be having. So let's say you're retiring at 60 and you got your children at a young age, sorry, at an old age. And by the time you're 60, they're getting into university. You need to have planned for it so that you can be able to handle the difference in the money that you would be able to need, the money that you will need at that point in time. That's on the one hand. The second one is connection after you have retired, is to get to the place where, if I can go back to traditionally what used to happen, when we grew up, we were expected to take care of our parents. But times are changing, economy has changed, the world really has become a lot tougher than it used to be. So we are not able to take care of our parents the same way. So for us, we shouldn't expect that of our children. So preparation for retirement includes knowing how we will take care of ourselves, how our money will take care of us in that retirement space. But at the same time, talking to our children, I could see, like, one of the things we do with my dad, he retired several years ago. But one of the things we do is when he's doing his things running around, I drive him so that we can connect. So I don't feel under pressure to necessarily go visit him and sit with him. But because there's something to be done, then I volunteer to drive him around. And on that drive, we get to connect, we get to talk, we get to catch up with each other. So it is building a connection that will allow you to continue connecting in retirement. And then there's a financial aspect where you actually prepare for the needs that you will have. And for that, I would advise you actually work with somebody who's financially savvy, somebody who knows how to manage money beyond workspace. Then I've seen the other question is the impact of culture on child growth. Oh, that's a very loaded one.
For sure.
Child growth will happen. If you can remember the slide that we looked at about the discontinuous and continuous development of a child. Child growth will happen. What does culture then come and do? Culture will come and either encourage it. So let's look at Western culture. Let's look at Western culture and its impact on child growth. Western culture, by virtue of allowing children to work from the age of 14, 15, 16, helps them grow up faster and better. They develop intellectually, financially, they mature a lot faster. For us, we consider our children for too long a time. We don't have an environment that allows them to, let's say, work. So they're not getting into the adult space fast enough or early enough. So what happens is they may grow physically, they may grow academically, but they're actually not growing in the self-survival and thriving skills that they may need. So culture can either debilitate or improve the situation as far as child growth is concerned. So what do you do as a parent? You choose the culture that you will follow. You choose the culture that you will impose on your children as they grow. For me, when I realized some of the talent, if I may call it that, innate talent my children had, I allowed them to work early. Give them a chance to do business, give them a chance to be paid for activities that they were doing. Society may not do it for you, but this village that you will form can help you decide the culture that you're going to have, because the impact on child growth will be as varied as the culture itself would be. Yeah. Young brother engaged in drugs, 20 years old, engaged in drugs in high school, now starting to turn miserable. No one wants him around them, me included. How do we assist him? I will refer this question to Wendy for the NACADA version of things. I will just answer it briefly when it comes to connection. A lot of the time, when we reject people, we take them to the place of addiction. And I know today we're not talking about addiction per se, but there's conversations we need to have about what even informs addiction. How do we end up getting stuck in a place where the drug is a thing that we are dependent on? Every time I see somebody who's miserable or dependent on drugs, I try to look at the connections this person has around them. So I know you may not want them around you, but assisting him would include getting him to a place of connection. But again, also there's a whole lot that we don't know. What was the drug? What was going on? What else is he doing? School dropout. There's too many other things that we would need to ask to be able to assist fully. So I would refer that particular question to Wendy to see what they have available.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Shalom. It's true that there's also many questions. I had follow-up on that question, huh? Because it's not clear, is the person addicted or did they just use in high school and then stopped, but their life got miserable? Yeah, like you say, you point out, it's very important to always remember there's underlying issues. Those underlying issues could be of an individual or personal nature, but they could also be environmental, which means they could come from or stem from the family, from the workplace. And so without really understanding those, it's hard to, in a sense, give a prescription. But like you say, it's always about connection. You might be surprised that we may have something to do with our family members, driving our family members into addiction or being miserable, and think that the solution is for them to be away from us, when really we need to explore that relationship further and see how it is that we are able to support them to get better. I would recommend you call our helpline. You can provide further details. 1192 is the number. And perhaps the counselors there will be able to assist in a more definitive way, because there are definitely more questions to explore. But one thing that's always important to remember is that the use of drugs is sometimes a symptom of a problem in an individual's life. And the reasons can be a combination of personal as well as a family or a workplace. And so responding to all of those would be important, or to understand where they are coming from. And then other issues, maybe like what Shalom mentioned earlier. I remember she said, I hope that your children are going to leave your house. Sometimes we, like she said, we keep our children home for too long. And so they don't learn to be independent. And so depending on the situation, perhaps this person needs more responsibility or more independence to be able to become useful for themselves and other people around them in the community. So we have 3 minutes left. I'll say maybe we can take one more question. In the chat, I can see we have the financial status. You've addressed that one. We have the teenage girl who's pushing boundaries, rude and disrespectful. And yet I want to build relationship. I feel like you've partly responded to that, because you talked about the needs of children at different ages. And connection can be done at all ages. There's also someone who's wondering about discussing financial status with their children without worrying them. I'm not sure if there's a quick response to that one. So I don't know which one you will pick here. Then there's also handling a toxic partner who's causing trauma on children. Yeah, those I think are the ones that are pending. So if you have quick fire responses, you can respond
just
to
try
all of
and
them.
I'll try and do quick fire responses, right?
All right,
For the teenage girl who's pushing boundaries and is being rude and disrespectful at home and is not listening, yet I want to build relationship, I would say pick a time when you're not in that fight, step aside with her, just go for whatever it might be, ice cream, a walk, something, and listen to her. Just listen, like what's going on, and just listen. Don't solve the problem. Don't try and do anything with it. Just listen. Because people push boundaries when they're feeling pushed to a corner. So what they're doing is fighting back because they feel like they've reached the end. So just listen. And if you hear things like you're not doing so and so, like so and so's mother, etc., now start taking it back to later, not immediately. Start taking it back to the boundaries that you have at home. You know, the choices that you have made as a family and all that, and see whether you can share the values. Quick fire answer. I hope it actually helps. Short one for financial status. How do I discuss my financial status with my child without worrying them? Don't tell them the problem, tell them the process. Your financial status may be, I have been let go of my salary has been cut, we won't be able to afford this. Don't tell them we won't be able to afford this and leave it there, because then that leaves them in a worrying space. Tell them this is what has happened, we won't be able to afford this, but this is what I'm thinking of doing to solve this problem. Because what happens is our children worry when they see like we have no control. But when we are in control, even when we haven't completely solved the problem, then they are sure that, you know, okay, I can trust that you're going to do the best that you can with the situation. And so what will happen is you'll tell them, okay, so we might need to cut this back because this is what's going on, but this is how I'm handling it. So tell them the process that you're taking as opposed to the problem that you're facing, right? So they can know that at least there's some hope somewhere. How do you handle a toxic spouse or partner causing trauma on the children? Trauma, again, is one of those topics that would need a whole lot more time, but let me try and answer it as briefly as I possibly can. Trauma is what happens inside of us because of what happens outside of us. So this toxic parent or spouse or partner is probably, let's say, shouting, beating. I'm just going to give those as examples because, again, they're not there. What they're doing is shouting and beating or something extreme to the children. So the children are going through traumatic experiences, but are not necessarily having the trauma. The trauma will come from what happens inside of them. So now, how do you help them? First and foremost, if it's possible to separate them, separate them. So the first thing to do is keep the child away from harm, physical, sexual, you know, all that harm. Then secondly, if you understand that trauma is what happens inside of us, that's the thing that you start strengthening in your child. They need help. It could be anything from psychological help all the way to the different things that we were saying. When they're out there socializing and they're having friends over and they're doing things with and for each other, with other people, then they build resilience. And therefore, they're able to manage the effects of what their spouse or partner is doing to them. So short answer to your question is the first step, separate them, especially if they're in danger, separate them. Then secondly, understand that because trauma is what's happening inside of them, then the thing to boost is what goes on inside of them. Their emotions, their social, psychological balance in there. So take them places, surround them with people who are treating them well, let them have, what do I call it? Other connections that will show that this traumatic experience is not a definer of their life. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much. I love what you're saying about working on the inside. A lot needs to be done on the inside because what we see on the outside comes from the inside. So building ourselves on the inside, helping to strengthen our children as well so that they can deal with whatever comes on the outside, even though the outside is. And I think that's essentially what is also great about parenting skills, because when we learn to be a better parent, the first person that we work on is actually ourselves, not even our children. And then by doing some of the essential things you're talking about, like, really, truly listening to our children, then, and spending time with them, we are building them on the inside, which then prepares them to deal with the outside, whether that outside has sex, relationships, drugs, whatever the outside changes, the inside is strong enough to be able to navigate. And they know that they always have the connection, and they can come back to us and talk about how do we move, what do I do? And, so it's really essential to build those. Thank you so much. Shalom, I can see the still coming. But wacha tumalizie hapo so we can respect time. It's now 4:34. So we have some resources as NACADA on our website. We have some booklets that you're able to find in the info hub. And these booklets are useful for parents. We also have booklets for children of different ages. As Sha was speaking, you noted that she talked about the different developmental stages, because each stage requires different attention, different approaches from us as parents. And so we have 6 to 8, 9 to 12, 13 to 15, 16 to 18. And then we have the guide also for parents. So you're able to access these from our website. I made a referral. Our toll-free line is available for those in Kenya, 1192. From Safaricom Telcom, we have counselors who are available 24 hours who can assist with issues, especially around alcohol and drugs. So before you head out, please type in the chat so we can know what was your biggest takeaway from today's webinar. I already shared what mine was, to ensure that, my children of the different ages have that village in place to help reinforce the values that we are raising them in our home. So what for you was your greatest takeaway today? We would love to hear from that. I've also shared a link in the chat to help us, get some feedback from you. So please click quick questions so that we can know how to keep improving and, serve you better with the webinars that we have. If you'd like to reach Shalom, the website is there, ritrogroup.co.ke. Oh, sorry, email her, not him, via Shalom at Ritro Group. She has the books accessible, Nuria Store and Amazon online, but you can also chat with her about those. I'll also send something to your emails, which you shared when you were registering, so that you can have more information from us and also from the Ritro Group. You're welcome to engage with us on social media, NACADA Kenya. We are on all the major social medias. Also, you can find Shalom and myself. We are on LinkedIn, we are Instagram, and also on Twitter. So whichever forum you prefer, hopefully you will get us there. And we can continue these conversations. We can't cover everything in one session. And that's why we schedule these webinars on a quarterly basis, based also on your feedback and areas of interest, which we capture on the survey, so that when we bring up the webinar, it's actually meeting a need that you have. So we thank you so much for attending today's session. I don't know if you'd like to say something in closing. Really appreciate your time, Shalom.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Wendy. I totally appreciate. And I think what I would say is, because it's about connecting and connections, building connections that will last a lifetime, you can start now. We can't say that all hope is lost. You can actually start now and build the connection, because the target is lifetime. Yes, we started with the horror of 1 to 18. We only have 1.5 years, but how about lifetime? We have a whole lifetime at the end. Yeah. So thank you. God bless you all, and happy parenting.
All right, thank you. So Steve says, in a financial crisis as a parent, the best way to share is to share solutions, not to dwell on them. This gives hope. He found that very profound. And Jefferson says that children learn behaviors, they internalize, they rehearse, and repeat. Those are the things that stood out. So we're hoping to see more of all of you online. Thank you for being here. The recording will be posted on NACADA Kenya's YouTube page. So you're also welcome to Watch it again if you missed some sections. Share with your colleagues or friends. Continue learning, and we wish you a happy parenting. And as Shalom said, now is always a great time to start. It's never too late as long as you're alive and your children are alive. So have a great time, and remember that you're not perfect. It's okay to make mistakes, learn from them, and keep getting better. May the Lord help us all in our parenting journey. God bless you all, and have a great afternoon, evening, morning, or whatever time it is that you're joining us from, wherever you are. Thank you. Bye.